Smile for the camera, Ethan, my wife said as the officers placed the handcuffs around my wrists, and I think that was the moment I realized she had already written the ending to our marriage in her mind. Rachel Walker stood on our front lawn holding her phone with both hands, making sure she captured everything. 30 years together. 30 years of birthdays, mortgages, family vacations, and Sunday dinners. And there she was, recording me like I was some stranger she had never loved. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply looked at her. She smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not a worried smile. A satisfied one. The kind of smile people wear when they think they have already won. Our neighbors stood across the street, pretending not to stare. Mrs. Hanson from next door held her mailbox open, but hadn't moved in almost 2 minutes. Someone farther down the block had stopped mowing the lawn. It was a beautiful evening in Dallas. 78 degrees. Clear skies. The smell of fresh-cut grass in the air. Everything looked normal. Except my life was falling apart. One of the younger officers avoided looking directly at me as he guided me toward the patrol car. I noticed the sympathy in his eyes. Maybe he thought I deserved this. Maybe he didn't. It didn't matter. Rachel adjusted her hair and stepped closer, making sure her phone had the perfect angle. I had seen that expression before. She wore it when she posted family photos online. The difference was that I wasn't smiling in this picture. "Can I bring my medication?" I asked quietly. The officer nodded politely and retrieved it from inside the house. Rachel never lowered her phone. She even stepped aside to make sure the patrol car remained visible in the frame. I sat down in the back seat without saying another word. The door closed. The world became silent. Through the window, I could still see her. Still filming. Still smiling. Detective Marcus Reed sat in the front passenger seat reviewing paperwork on his tablet. He looked tired, middle-aged, professional. The kind of man who had probably seen every kind of family disaster imaginable. He barely acknowledged me. To him, I was just another file. Another unhappy husband. Another call at the end of a long shift. We drove less than half a mile before his phone buzzed. He frowned and opened a digital folder attached to my name. At first, he seemed bored. Then his eyes narrowed. He stopped scrolling. His face changed. He leaned closer to the screen. His expression lost all color. He looked at the date. Then he looked at me in the rearview mirror. Not with suspicion. Not with anger. Something else. Confusion. He opened another document. Then another. The younger officer beside him noticed the change. "Everything okay, detective?" Marcus Reed didn't answer immediately. He stared at the screen for several long seconds. Then he whispered something so softly I almost didn't hear it. "That can't be right." He picked up his phone and made a call. "Captain, it's Reed. I need you to look at something right now." He paused. His eyes remained fixed on me. "No, sir. I don't think we should process him yet." Another pause. The younger officer glanced between us. "What's going on?" he asked. Detective Reed swallowed hard. Then he looked directly into my eyes through the mirror. And for the first time since the handcuffs clicked around my wrists, someone inside that car looked afraid. "Pull over," he said quietly. "Right now." Detective Marcus Reed kept his eyes on me as the patrol car rolled onto the shoulder of the road. Traffic moved past us. Evening sunlight reflected off the windshield. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Finally, he asked again what was wrong. Reed lowered the tablet slowly. His voice was calm, but I could hear something underneath it. Something I had not heard before. Uncertainty. He asked me a question. "Mr. Walker, how long have you lived at your current address?" I looked at him through the partition. 28 years. He nodded. "And your wife is Rachel Walker?" I answered yes. He took a deep breath and rubbed his forehead. Then he called someone again. He spoke quietly, using terms I had not heard in years. The younger officer stared at him like he had lost his mind. I sat there silently. After all, silence had become familiar to me. It had become part of my life long before handcuffs touched my wrists. 3 days earlier, life had looked normal, or at least I thought it did. Rachel and I had been married for 30 years. We met in college, built everything together, raised our son Ryan in the same house in North Dallas. We survived layoffs, recessions, and family losses. I believe those things made a marriage stronger. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe they simply taught people how to hide better. Lately, Rachel had changed. Nothing dramatic. Small things. She smiled more, cooked my favorite meals, asked about retirement plans. She even brought up taking a trip to Montana after I sold my company. She had not spoken that warmly in years. I thought perhaps we had found each other again. I wanted to believe it. At 58 years old, a man wants peace. He wants quiet evenings, family dinners, grandchildren someday. He does not expect surprises. Certainly not from the woman who shared his name. Rachel had insisted we celebrate our 30th anniversary properly. She booked a reservation at a nice steakhouse downtown, bought a new dress, even held my hand while we watched television. I remember thinking how strange it felt. Not unpleasant, just unfamiliar. One night, she rested her head on my shoulder and asked me if I trusted her. I laughed. 30 years together. Of course I trusted her. I trusted her more than I trusted myself. Looking back now, I realized something. She did not ask because she needed reassurance. She asked because she already knew the answer. And she needed me to keep believing. Ryan had noticed the change too. Our son called more often. Stopped by the house one Sunday. We grilled burgers in the backyard. He smiled when he saw Rachel and me laughing together. "Good to see you two like this again," he said. Rachel squeezed my hand and smiled. I remember thinking how beautiful she looked in the evening sunlight. That memory still hurts. Detective Reed finished his call and sat quietly. Then he turned around completely and looked at me. "Mr. Walker," he said carefully, "I need to ask you something very important." His expression had changed. There was no accusation in his eyes anymore. No suspicion, just concern. "Have you told anyone about your past?" I frowned. "No." Reed nodded slowly. "Then that means somebody else found it." The younger officer stared at him. "Found what?" Reed swallowed hard. He looked down at the old file again, then back at me. Something that should have stayed buried 20 years ago. For a moment, I thought Detective Reed had confused me with someone else. 20 years ago felt like another lifetime. I had spent decades making sure it stayed that way. I looked at him through the partition and quietly asked what he was talking about. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he closed the tablet and glanced toward the younger officer. "Take us to the station, but do not process anything until I speak with Captain Harris." The younger officer nodded without another question. Something had changed. I could feel it. Nobody treated me like a criminal anymore. They treated me like a puzzle. As we drove, my thoughts drifted back to the last few months. Looking back now, the signs had been there. I simply chose not to see them. Rachel had become protective of her phone. At first, I laughed about it. Everyone had privacy. I respected that. But little things began to stand out. She would leave the room when calls came in. She started taking long walks after dinner. Sometimes she smiled at messages and quickly locked the screen when I entered the room. I told myself not to become one of those suspicious husbands. 30 years together deserved trust. At least that was what I believed. Money started disappearing too. Not enough to trigger alarms. Small amounts. $800 here. $1,200 there. When I asked, Rachel always had an explanation. Gifts. Repairs. Charity events. I believed every word because I wanted peace. One Saturday morning, I noticed she had opened a new joint investment account. She brushed it off with a smile. "I am planning for our future," she said. I kissed her forehead and thanked her. I never questioned anything. Ryan noticed some of it. One afternoon, he stopped by the office. We sat together and watched the Cowboys game replay while eating barbecue sandwiches. He hesitated before speaking. "Dad, is everything okay between you and Mom?" I laughed and told him marriage had seasons. Some years were warmer than others. He nodded but did not seem convinced. "She just seems different lately," he said quietly. I shrugged. People change. We all do. Looking back, I wish I had listened more carefully. 3 weeks before my arrest, I came home early because a client canceled a meeting. Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table. The second she heard the garage door, she closed her laptop so quickly she almost spilled her coffee. I remember smiling and apologizing for surprising her. She laughed nervously and told me she had been shopping online. I believed her. I always believed her. A few days later, she suggested renewing our vows. That surprised me. Rachel had never been sentimental, but she talked about fresh starts, new memories, retirement together, Montana, fishing trips, long drives. She even showed me pictures of cabins near Flathead Lake. I thought maybe God had answered my prayers. Maybe life was giving us another chance. Detective Reed interrupted my thoughts. "Mr. Walker, did your wife ever ask about your years before Texas?" I slowly raised my eyes. The question froze me. Rachel had asked exactly that. 2 months earlier. She wanted stories, old photographs, names, places. At the time, I thought she was trying to reconnect. Now, sitting in the back seat of that patrol car, I realized something that sent a chill through me. She had not been trying to remember my past. She had been searching for something hidden inside it. And somehow, she found it. The question from Detective Reed stayed with me during the entire drive. Had Rachel asked about my years before Texas? She had, more than once. At the time, I thought she wanted to know me better. Now I wondered if she had ever been searching for memories at all. 20 years ago, I buried that chapter of my life and promised myself I would never bring it into my home. Some secrets were not shameful. They were simply painful. They belonged to another version of me. A younger man. A different world. Rachel knew that. Or at least I thought she did. We met when I was 28 years old. I had already moved to Texas. I had already built a small business and started over. She never pushed me about the years before that. In fact, she used to say the past did not matter. I only care about the man standing in front of me, she once told me. I believed her. Looking back, I remember the exact moment things changed. It was about 2 months before our anniversary. We were sitting on the back porch after dinner. The sun was setting. A warm breeze moved through the trees. Rachel had a glass of iced tea in her hand and seemed unusually relaxed. She smiled and asked me if I had any old photographs from my younger days. I laughed and told her there were not many. She asked about old friends, places I lived, jobs I had before Dallas. Nothing strange, nothing alarming, just questions. I answered them without hesitation. She listened carefully, too carefully. I remember one particular question. Did you ever use another name professionally? She asked. I laughed and said no. Then I corrected myself. Years ago, I had used a shortened version of my middle name. It had been nothing important, just old paperwork and old memories. Rachel smiled and changed the subject immediately. I forgot about it. She did not. A few weeks later, she found an old box in the garage while I was at work. At least that was what she told me. When I came home, photographs and documents were spread across the dining room table. She looked excited, almost curious. I feel like I am discovering a new man, she joked. I sat beside her and explained the pictures. Old fishing trips. My first truck. Friends I had not spoken to in decades. Then she held up one photograph and asked me about a man standing beside me. I froze for a second. Not because I was guilty, because I had not seen his face in 20 years. I quietly told her we had worked together long ago. Nothing more. She stared at the picture a little longer before placing it back inside the box. That night, she held me tighter than usual. She even whispered that she loved me. I slept peacefully. She stayed awake. I know that now. A week later, she suggested cleaning the attic together. Another week after that, she wanted to organize old files. Suddenly, memories I had forgotten became interesting to her. Birth certificates, tax records, old addresses, even names of people I barely remembered. At the time, I thought she wanted us to simplify our lives before retirement. Now I understood something much darker. She had been collecting pieces, building something, looking for a door into a past that I had closed decades ago. And somehow, she had found the one thing I never thought anyone would discover. When we finally arrived at the station, Detective Reed stepped out of the car and quietly told the younger officer something that made him stare at me with wide eyes. Then Reed turned back toward me and said words I never expected to hear. Mr. Walker, somebody has been using information that should not even exist anymore. Inside the station, everything changed. Nobody rushed me. Nobody raised their voice. Detective Reed personally removed the handcuffs and apologized for the inconvenience. I sat in a quiet interview room with a cup of coffee in front of me and 1,000 questions running through my mind. 20 minutes earlier, I had been sitting in the back of a patrol car wondering how my life had fallen apart. Now people were looking at me differently. Not with suspicion, with caution. Detective Reed returned carrying a thick folder and closed the door behind him. He sat down slowly and stared at me for a moment before speaking. Mr. Walker, before we go any further, I need to know if you have spoken with anyone recently about your years in Virginia. I slowly shook my head. Nobody. What? Reed nodded as if that answer confirmed something. Then somebody else did the digging. He slid a photograph across the table. My heart nearly stopped. It was the same photograph Rachel had found in the garage. The same picture I had not seen in 2 decades. I stared at it in disbelief. Where did you get this? I asked quietly. Reed looked uncomfortable. It was attached to the complaint package submitted against you. I looked up at him. Complaint package? He nodded. Whoever put this together included old addresses, old records, photographs, and information that should have been archived years ago. I stared at the picture again. Memories came flooding back. The fishing trip, the old truck, the friends I had left behind. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, just pieces of a life I no longer lived. Why would anybody do that? I asked. Reed leaned forward. Because whoever prepared this believed they had discovered something important, but they misunderstood what they were looking at. He paused and tapped the folder with his finger. Or maybe somebody else helped them misunderstand. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan. 6 missed calls. I immediately asked to call him back. Reed handed me the phone. My son answered before the first ring finished. He sounded terrified. Dad, where are you? Mom told me you were taken away. She is crying. Everybody is posting things online. I closed my eyes. Rachel had wasted no time. I am okay, son, I said calmly. Listen carefully. Do not believe everything you hear. Ryan lowered his voice. Dad, something feels wrong. Mom has been acting strange. She keeps making calls, and she told me not to contact you. That sentence stayed with me. She told him not to contact me. I thanked him and promised I would explain everything soon. After I ended the call, Detective Reed looked thoughtful. Your son sounds like a good man. I smiled faintly. He is. Reed nodded. Then there is something else you should know. He opened the folder and turned several pages. We traced the source of the records used in this complaint. Most of them came from publicly available databases. But one document did not. He stopped speaking for a second. One document came from inside your own house. I stared at him in silence. Reed continued. Whoever submitted this had access to original files, personal papers, family records, things only someone close to you could have found. I looked down at my coffee. Suddenly, all those evenings in the attic, all those questions, all those smiles, they no longer looked like love. They looked like preparation. Then Detective Reed quietly placed another photograph on the table. And when I saw who was standing beside Rachel in that picture, I stopped breathing for a second. The photograph nearly slipped from my hand. Standing beside Rachel was a man I recognized immediately. Gregory Hale. I had not seen him in more than 20 years. His hair was gray now, and he had put on weight, but there was no mistaking his face. Detective Reed watched my reaction carefully. You know him? He asked quietly. I nodded slowly. Too well. Reed leaned back in his chair. Then I suggest you tell me everything. I stared at the picture for several seconds. Gregory Hale and I had worked together in Virginia decades earlier. We were not friends. We were business partners for a short time. After that, our lives went in different directions. I moved to Texas and never looked back. I had not spoken to him since. At least, that was what I believed. Detective Reed folded his arms. Mr. Walker, your wife met this man 3 months ago. I blinked. 3 months. Reed nodded. We have security footage from several locations. Coffee shops, restaurants, a hotel conference center. They met repeatedly. I felt cold. Not angry. Not yet. Just cold. 30 years together. 30 years of trust. And somehow, a stranger from my past had found his way back into my life through my own wife. I closed my eyes and remembered something I had dismissed months earlier. Rachel had suddenly become interested in business conventions. She attended seminars, networking events, charity dinners. I encouraged her. I thought she was trying new hobbies. I even joked that retirement had made her restless. Looking back now, she was not looking for hobbies. She was looking for Gregory Hale. Or maybe he found her first. Who was he to her? I asked quietly. Detective Reed shook his head. We are still trying to understand that. Then he opened another page in the file. But we know one thing. They have been planning something together. My stomach tightened. Reed showed me copies of bank transfers. Nothing enormous. Small amounts. $800, $1,500, $3,000. Payments hidden over several months. Rachel's account. Gregory's consulting company. I stared at the numbers in disbelief. Suddenly, all those missing dollars made sense. Every explanation, every smile, every promise. It all felt different now. Detective Reed remained calm. We believe Gregory convinced your wife that your old records contained something valuable, something dangerous, something she could use. I looked up slowly. There is nothing there. Reed nodded. Exactly. But somebody sold her a fantasy. My phone rang again. Ryan. I answered immediately. He sounded shaken. Dad, Mom is telling everyone you disappeared. She says you refused to cooperate and that you abandoned her. I closed my eyes. Rachel was building a story, brick by brick. Ryan, listen to me carefully. I need you to stay calm. He lowered his voice. Dad, there is something else. I heard him swallow. Mom has somebody at the house. I opened my eyes. Who? I do not know. A man. I have never seen him before. Detective Reed sat upright. I placed the phone on speaker. Ryan continued. I stopped by because I was worried. Mom got angry. She told me to leave. But before I left, I saw them carrying boxes out of the attic. Detective Reed and I exchanged a glance. The attic, the old records, the photographs, the documents. Everything suddenly clicked together. Ryan's voice trembled. Dad, I think Mom is trying to get rid of something. Detective Reed immediately stood up and reached for his phone. But before he dialed, another officer rushed into the room looking pale. Detective Reed, he said urgently. You need to see this right now. Mrs. Walker just posted a video online, and half the city already believes her story. The officer placed a tablet in front of Detective Reed. He pressed play without saying a word. There was Rachel, standing in front of our house, tears in her eyes, her voice trembling. She told the world that she had spent years living in fear. She spoke softly, carefully, like someone reading from a script. She told everyone she had finally found the courage to speak. Millions of people would believe her because she looked convincing. That was the frightening part. Lies dressed in emotion often travel faster than truth. I watched silently, not because I believed her, but because I no longer recognized the woman on that screen. Detective Reed paused the video and frowned. Look at the timestamp. I looked closer. The video had been uploaded less than 20 minutes after I was placed in the patrol car. Too quickly, too perfectly. No panic, no confusion, no hesitation, just a polished performance. Reed pointed to the background. Notice something? I narrowed my eyes. Behind Rachel, through the open garage, I saw several cardboard boxes. The same boxes Ryan had mentioned. Reed immediately zoomed in. The image became blurry, but not blurry enough. One box had old labels. Virginia. Another had my name written in black marker. My chest tightened. She had already planned everything. Detective Reed stood up and called Captain Harris. Within minutes, people were moving quickly around the station. I sat quietly and stared at the table. My phone buzzed again. Ryan. His voice sounded different this time. Angry. Confused. Hurt. Dad. I stayed nearby after Mom threw me out. I wanted to make sure she was okay. He paused. I wish I had gone home. What happened? I asked softly. Gregory Hale left the house 20 minutes ago. I froze. You saw him? Yes. I took pictures because something felt wrong. Detective Reed immediately reached for the phone. Ryan sent the photographs. Gregory was carrying boxes toward a black SUV. Another man stood beside him. Detective Reed stared at the second face. Who is that? He whispered. Then his expression changed. No, that cannot be right. He enlarged the image. The second man looked familiar to me too, although older. His name was Stephen Mercer. Years ago, Stephen worked in accounting for one of my first companies. We lost touch after he moved away. Reed turned toward me. Mr. Walker, did you know Mercer and Hale knew each other? I shook my head. Not that I know of. Reed exhaled slowly. They do now. Another officer entered the room carrying a folder. Detective, we traced several payments. Reed opened the documents. Stephen Mercer had been receiving money from Gregory Hale's company. Gregory Hale had been receiving money from an account connected to Rachel. 3 names. 3 different directions. 1 circle. Suddenly, I remembered something strange. About 6 months earlier, Rachel insisted on changing accountants. I never cared about finances. She handled most of the paperwork. She told me it was easier, more efficient. I trusted her completely. Detective Reed looked at me carefully. Mr. Walker, I think your wife believes there is something hidden in your past that can make all of them rich. I laughed quietly. Not because it was funny, because it was tragic. They had spent months chasing a fantasy, destroying a family, destroying 30 years, chasing shadows. Then Detective Reed's phone rang. He answered and listened silently. His face grew serious. He thanked the caller and slowly lowered the phone. That was Captain Harris, he said. We have a problem. He looked directly at me. Rachel Walker just withdrew almost everything from your joint accounts. Then he paused before adding 6 words that made my blood run cold. And she bought a one-way ticket. For several seconds, nobody spoke. I simply stared at the table. A one-way ticket. 30 years of marriage reduced to a departure gate and a suitcase. Detective Reed quietly sat down across from me. He expected anger. Maybe tears. I had neither. I just felt tired. Tired in a way I had never experienced before. My phone buzzed again. Ryan. I answered immediately. Dad, I am sorry, he said before I could speak. His voice broke. I should have seen this sooner. I closed my eyes. Son, none of this is your fault. He took a deep breath. There is something else. I listened carefully. I followed Mom after she left the house. She went to a hotel near the airport. Detective Reed raised his eyes. Ryan continued. Gregory Hale and that other man are there too. Reed immediately wrote down the location. Then another call came into his phone. Captain Harris. Reed listened carefully before nodding several times. When he ended the call, he looked almost relieved. She is not going anywhere tonight. I frowned. Reed explained that Rachel's passport had expired 6 months earlier. Her international flight plans had already collapsed before she reached the airport. For the first time that evening, I almost laughed. 30 years with me, and she forgot one simple detail. She planned everything except reality. An hour later, another surprise arrived. Attorney Daniel Brooks entered the station. I had known Daniel for 20 years. He handled several business matters for me and had become a trusted friend. The moment he saw me, he shook his head sadly. Ethan, I have been trying to reach you all afternoon. He sat beside me and placed a folder on the table. I think I know what they were after. Detective Reed leaned forward. Daniel opened several documents. About 8 months ago, Rachel contacted me. She asked strange questions. I frowned. Questions about what? Daniel looked uncomfortable. About your estate. About hidden assets. About old trusts. About accounts under previous names. Detective Reed and I exchanged a glance. Daniel sighed. I thought she was simply preparing for retirement. But she became obsessed. She believed there was something enormous hidden somewhere. I stared at him. There is not. Daniel nodded. I know. But somebody convinced her otherwise. He handed Detective Reed copies of emails. Gregory Hale's name appeared repeatedly. Investment opportunities. Property records. Private research. Every message carried the same promise. There was a fortune hidden in Ethan Walker's past. They just had to uncover it. Detective Reed sat back in disbelief. They destroyed a marriage, chasing a ghost. Daniel nodded quietly. Greed does not need facts. It only needs hope. My phone vibrated again. Ryan. His voice sounded calmer now. Dad, I just left the hotel parking lot. He paused. Mom and Gregory are fighting. Detective Reed raised an eyebrow. Ryan continued. They are yelling at each other. Gregory keeps saying she promised him millions. Daniel Brooks closed his eyes and sighed. Of course. Reed looked confused. Daniel slowly opened another document and pushed it across the table. Because there was never any fortune. He pointed to the paper. 20 years ago, Ethan sold everything and started over. There is nothing hidden. There never was. The room fell silent. 30 years. Betrayed over something that never existed. Then Detective Reed's computer beeped. He opened the message and suddenly sat upright. His face changed. Well, he said quietly. Apparently there is one thing they never knew. Everyone looked at him. He slowly turned the monitor toward me. And when I saw the name on the screen, I whispered words I had not spoken in 20 years. My God, he is still alive. The name on the screen belonged to Thomas Granger. For a moment, I could not speak. 20 years ago, Thomas and I built a company together in Virginia. He was older than me. Smarter. Patient. When the market collapsed, we lost touch. A few months later, I moved to Texas and started over. I believe Thomas had passed away years ago. I had heard rumors. Nothing more. Detective Reed stared at me. You know him? I nodded slowly. He was my partner. Reed turned the monitor around. He contacted the authorities this morning. I blinked in disbelief. Why? Reed smiled for the first time all evening. Because he saw the video your wife posted. Daniel Brooks leaned forward in surprise. Reed continued. Thomas recognized your face immediately. He also recognized the lies being spread online. Apparently, he has been looking for you for years. My mind struggled to process everything. 20 years without a word. And somehow, after all this time, he appeared again. Reed handed me the phone. A video call request waited on the screen. My hands trembled slightly as I answered. An elderly man appeared. Gray hair, wrinkles, but the same eyes. Thomas smiled. Ethan Walker, he said softly. I was beginning to think I would never find you. I smiled for the first time that day. I thought you were gone. Thomas laughed. Not yet. We spoke for 20 minutes. It felt like 20 years disappeared. Then Thomas said something that stunned everyone in the room. Ethan, do you remember what I told you when we closed the company? I frowned. Not really. He smiled. I told you I would take care of the unfinished business. Daniel Brooks suddenly sat upright. Unfinished business. Thomas nodded. The patents, the royalties, the licensing agreements. I stared in confusion. Thomas laughed again. You signed your share over to me temporarily because you wanted a fresh start. I promised I would hold it until you were ready. I almost fell silent. Thomas, that company died 20 years ago. No, my friend. It evolved. Detective Reed and Daniel exchanged glances. Thomas continued. I spent 20 years rebuilding everything. Quietly. Carefully. I retired last year. He smiled warmly. And I always intended to find you. Tears filled my eyes. Not because of money. Because someone had kept his word. After all these years. Thomas looked serious. Ethan, I saw what happened online. I know people betrayed you. But do not let them destroy your heart. They chased shadows and forgot the most important thing. Loyalty. I nodded quietly. Over the following weeks, the truth came out. Rachel's story collapsed under scrutiny. Gregory Hale disappeared from her life the moment he realized there was no hidden fortune waiting for him. Stephen Mercer cooperated with investigators. Ryan stayed by my side through everything. He apologized 100 times, but I told him the same thing every time. You are my son. That will never change. 6 months later, I sold my company and left Texas. I bought a small cabin overlooking Flathead Lake in Montana. The mornings were peaceful there. The air smelled different. Cleaner. Sometimes Ryan visited with his family. We fished together. Laughed together. Life became simple again. One afternoon, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single page. Rachel's handwriting. 4 words. Please forgive me, Ethan. I folded the paper and placed it inside a drawer. I did not tear it. I did not answer it. Some people think revenge means making others suffer. They are wrong. Sometimes revenge is simply refusing to let betrayal steal the rest of your life. And every now and then, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset over the lake, I remembered the last image Rachel captured with her phone. She thought she was filming the end of my story. She never realized she had only recorded the final scene of hers.